Dr. Whitman.
Here.
Andy Dennis.
Present.
Ed Vitale.
Here.
Chris Petrie.
Here.
Paul Pickney.
Here.
Aileen McNabb-Coleman.
Present.
Keith Chapman.
Here.
Joseph Forrest.
Present.
Charlie Ripley.
Present.
Joseph Bennett.
Here.
Elaine Daly.
Here.
Timothy Lattimore.
Here.
Michael Vizio.
Here.
Ryan Foley.
Present.
Pat Malone.
Here. At this time, if you'd please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of prayer in honor of the deaths of Dr. Nicholas DeSocio, who served in U.S. Air Force as a dentist and served the community for over 40 years through his dental practice. Mildred Millie Guzlak delivered mail to the county office building for many years. And Howard Zach, brother of Jody Nickerson, IT employee. He served 10 years in the U.S. Navy, serving during Desert Storm.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to acknowledge another passing, Thomas Lennox, who was for many years an arborist, did an excellent job with all the trees that with our urban forests. So he'll be sorely missed.
Thank you, Mr. Lattimore. We have no public hearing, no proclamations, so we'll get right into the presentations for the draft shared services plan.
On the proclamations, this weekend we had the 50th anniversary for the class of 1968. Auburn, or Mount Carmel, Central, East, and West, and Ginger Sheffy is here. She used to be our Union chieftain, and she put it all together. Thank you very much for a wonderful weekend.
And Jimmy was our class president.
Imagine that. Mr. Wood, you want to?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to have to get a taller one of these.
2x4s.
I'll put it in next year's budget. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to present to the legislature our draft shared services plan. As you know, this is something we've been working on for some time. 2 years ago, New York State adopted in the governor's budget a requirement for all 57 counties in the state to develop a shared services plan. We had to form a panel that was comprised and led by the chair or by the CEO of the county. The CEO was defined in statute as either the county executive, the chairman of the legislature, or a county administrator or manager in a charter form of government. So in our form of government, that is the chairman of the legislature. And the panel was made up of the mayor of the city of Auburn, the mayors of all the villages, and the town supervisors. So we had a panel of 33 people that have been meeting all summer to develop this plan. The requirements for the plan are that we identify recurring tax savings opportunities. It's important to recognize that not every service and not every proposal in this plan is a county-wide plan, but there's also opportunities for smaller collaborations between municipalities themselves that doesn't include the county, or in a couple of cases, collaborations between the city and the county. The plan must include a certificate of savings that has been prepared for the chairman to execute. The state has offered matching funds for documented savings after the first year of implementation. What that means and how the state defines that is January 1st to December 31st. A project has to be completed within that specific calendar year, started and completed with documented savings to be eligible for reimbursement. Our next steps are that the plan has to be submitted to the state prior to September 15th, and then prior to October 15th, I have to make another public presentation of the plan. To date, we've held 5 panel meetings. We had an orientation where we met with the panelists and introduced them to the process. We had several sessions focused on highway and public works, assessment, human resources, energy. We discussed the potential expansion of our healthcare consortium from a intermunicipal agreement to an Article 47, if we can meet the threshold requirements for doing so. We looked at joint purchasing of energy procurement. We looked at consolidation of town and village justice courts. And at the end of all of that, last week or the week before, we met and reviewed the draft plan with the panelists. Tonight, we're presenting it to you. We're required to hold 3 public hearings, which we will hold throughout the county, in the north, south, and in the center. Those have been scheduled for next week. One in Moravia, one in Moravia, one in Ira, and one here in Auburn. And it would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge and thank all of the people who've worked on this throughout the summer. Starting with all of the panel members who've been available and participating in the process, the Onondaga BOCES staff who've made their facility available, and their technical staff who've supported us in setting up our presentations and microphones and everything there. The Citizen has covered it very well. We've tried to keep the public as informed as possible with sharing drafts and outlines and documents that we shared with the panelists online. Municipal staff, not just at the county, but at all levels, towns, villages, at the city, who've supported analyzing these projects. We've had several people from the state come to meet with us to review whether certain projects qualified. And we certainly appreciate their time for that. And then we had a couple of guest speakers that came and discussed how projects fit and were developed in other places. In Chemung County, the Public Works Commissioner, who simultaneously serves as the Commissioner of Public Works in the city and another town, came and discussed their 10-year evolution in shared services. And Barb Blanchard from MEGA came to talk about how energy procurement through MEGA has been certified by the Department of State and incorporated in a number of plans that were submitted last year. Our project team worked for most of the last 6 weeks on this while trying to keep everything else afloat. Steve and Lynn have been working incredibly hard on this. Lori and Monica have been working with us to schedule and facilitate all of the meetings. And Bill also made a presentation at the highway portion of the workshop about their experience with shared services in the North Country. So a lot of people have been working really hard on this, and hopefully you'll be happy with the results that we produced. We had a number of other key contributors from the city manager and his staff, a number of other department heads who led various sessions throughout the workshops, and we also had a graduate intern who helped facilitate and set up and support our efforts. I wanted to take a minute to outline what the legislature's role in this process is. The statute says that we're required, that the CEO is required to make a presentation on the panel to the legislature. The legislature reviews the certified tax saving projections. The legislature can issue an advisory report with recommendations via a majority vote, and then the chair of the legislature can either modify the plan to reflect those recommendations or attach them to the report. We have a draft resolution before you that acknowledges the tax savings projections and recommends approval by the Shared Services Panel. I think it's incredibly important to note that nothing in this plan is binding. The requirements are that we have these panel meetings, that we develop proposals, and that we submit a plan. Anything that's in the plan, if we're able to complete and can document savings, is eligible to be submitted for reimbursement. Nothing in the plan is required to be done. So as we talk about some of the projects that haven't been fully flushed out or require additional approval of the legislature, I think it's important to keep in mind that if we don't put things in the plan, they're not eligible to be submitted for reimbursement. So we have some things that we're working on with the city that that we think are opportunities. If we're able to execute them and pull them off, then there's an opportunity to submit them for reimbursement. But nothing in this plan binds the county to anything going forward. We have 9 shared services, and I'm not going to read them all to you because I'm going to go through them one by one as we move forward. And the 9 shared services reflect an estimated tax savings projection of $1 million in the first year, and about 1.1, almost 1.2 in 2020. The first project that we discussed was joint purchasing for materials in the public works arena. We thought it was best to focus on stone and salt, as those are the largest ticket items that all of the highway departments and public works departments purchase. Lynn calculated the numbers on here, taking our total quantity purchases and realizing that between the city and the county, if we aggregated those purchases together, we would increase our purchase amount by almost 2.5 times. So we spend roughly $800,000 on stone and salt. The city spends about $1 million. The other municipalities spend about $800,000. So we estimated a projection here that if we aggregated the purchase, that we could save 10%. The way purchasing is currently done is that we do bid these materials out, and we piggyback it, so that allows the municipalities to get the same price that we pay. But our estimate, our hypothesis is that if we bid out the entire amount, that we can drive the price down. So rather than them just piggybacking on our price, we put out an RFP for the total amount, and then everybody gets a better price based on that. The second shared services we propose creating is an equipment inventory that allows for awareness of specialized equipment. Right now, in isolated pockets of the county, highway departments routinely support each other. They loan each other equipment. On paving, you'll see a number of towns working together. But some towns have equipment that they need. Some towns rent equipment when they need it. And the idea here is that if we build an inventory of equipment, we know when people are either using it or not using it. That would allow for sharing. Or more importantly, when their replacement schedules are, so that if the county and several towns are all buying plow trucks in a given year, if we bought them together, that aggregated purchase would again drive the price down versus a couple of towns each buying one on their own. So we don't have a direct estimate on savings for this one, but we do anticipate that could yield some savings that if it came to fruition in 2019, we would be able to submit for reimbursement. We also looked at expanding the Cayuga County Healthcare Consortium. This one's a challenge because our limitation is limited by state statute. Right now, the Healthcare Consortium, as most of you know, is comprised of the county, the city, the community college, and soil and water. And we have about 1,650 covered lives. In order to create a formalized healthcare consortium under Article 47 of the Finance Law, we would need 2,000 members. Our projections of the municipalities who are interested in joining doesn't quite get us there. But nevertheless, we do estimate that if we could get to a waiver to create an Article 47 consortium, we estimate that we could drop their costs by roughly 3%. It may be more, it may be less. We didn't spend a lot of time rigorously analyzing these projections, and we were conservative in our estimates. What we saw when we looked at the plans that were submitted last year is that there were some very high overinflated projections in a number of projects. What we've learned in the year is that that didn't matter, because the Department of Budget is promulgating their regulations of how they're going to reimburse these projects. So, we take our best estimate at what we think the savings are, and then if we are able to develop a project and implement it, we'll document those savings and submit them. This one will require some type of either change to legislation, which could happen next year based on how many other counties included similar projects that also wouldn't qualify, or there are other avenues we could look at, like expanding to partner with another county or another school district to try to get over that threshold number. So used to Steve flipping the slides for me. As I mentioned, Barb Blanchard from Mega came and made a presentation about the energy procurement purchasing option. At present, there are several villages in the county that are already participating in this, several others who are in the process of completing their assessment to see what their energy savings would be. But we did calculate the tax savings here to be approximately $70,000 to $80,000 for those that would be new to the program. And we did submit our information to see what type of savings could be yielded from our participation in Mega. We've also been going down some other paths to see what other savings opportunities we would have through other energy procurement. Our contract is up this year, and so one way or another we'll be doing something and bringing some proposal forward to you. Mega has been pre-approved by the Department of State as a approved shared service, so any savings that are yield in the first year would be reimbursable from the Division of Budget. We had a really great session on shared services in the assessment area, and there's a lot of communication errors that are made in discussing this that we want to be careful, and I think Kelly did a really great job in explaining that we are not talking about countywide assessment. What we are talking about is expanding the capacity of the county to contract with municipalities who want to contract with us for a range of options. And that could include being full countywide assessment like we do in Moravia and Niles. It could also include a menu of other options that are less than full assessment, such as data collection, exemption administration, appraisal services, or the full boat of everything. It was really important for us to begin to get a sense from the municipalities of what their level of interest is in this for several reasons. One, statewide, all of the assessors' appointments are up next year. Two, to the extent that they're interested in contracting with us at the end of those terms, it gives us enough lead time to expand our capacity to do so with a reasonable assurance that we'll have a contract and a revenue stream to fund that. While we don't have specific savings here, what we do anticipate is that if enough towns chose to come with us, the aggregate of what it would cost us to hire somebody on a full-time basis versus what they're each paying cumulatively on a part-time basis might result in savings for them. And that has been the experience with some of the other counties that have implemented this. But I want to emphasize we're not proposing countywide assessment like what exists in Tompkins. What we're proposing is increasing our opportunity and our capacity to contract with those municipalities who would like to contract with us for services. We also looked at a number of, we had a session on town and village justice courts. There wasn't a specific proposal that came out of this, but there's an interest in exploring options. The town and village of Moravia currently just moved into sharing a facility, a court facility. They also have the same two judges. So to the extent that there was an opportunity there for the village to dissolve the court and allow the town to handle it, that is one option. There was also a couple of other towns indicated that they had really great facilities, that they would be happy to share with other courts if they wanted to hold their court in their facilities. And the village of Port Byron also talked, or excuse me, the village of Weedsport, I think it was, talked about wanting to explore a joint new building with the town, either for the court or for an entire municipal complex. But as I said, those are, I think those are much larger multi-year projects that likely wouldn't be completed in this year, but we wanted to include them to the extent that it gave some additional credibility to applying for grant funds and planning funds as they sought to continue to go down this road in the future. One of the projects that I assume you may have a number of questions about is the sports complex at Falcon Park. And this has come up relatively quickly, and I'm actually glad Brian's here, so if you have questions, I'll just kick it to him. But the reason this is in the plan, and the reason it's really shown as a county project in the plan, is because the way shared service, the way the law is structured, a shared service can only exist between two municipal entities. So the college on its own doesn't qualify, but the county does as its fiscal sponsor. So the way we projected savings here is that the college commissioned a study to build a sports complex adjacent to its campus on Franklin Street, and it came out to just under $15 million. Now, when you subtract out SUNY's 50% portion of that, it would be roughly a $7.5 million local share. Now, I'm not saying that we've committed to doing that project in any way, but if that's our starting point, that this is what the college is looking at, then the way we calculate the costs is that we assume a 15-year debt service at 3% interest and figure out what our annual what the county or the college's annual payment would be, which was about $615,000 on an annual basis for the life of the loan. The project that they're looking at with the city is a roughly $3 million project. So again, if we take out the 50% that would be covered by SUNY, the college, AKA the county's portion for shared services purposes, would be $1.5 million. Assumed at the same 15-year, 3% debt service, we'd be looking at $125,000 for an annual savings of about $490,000. So if this project is able to be done, and it's timed in a way that the obligations of the college to the city start in January, and then we would be looking at a roughly $490,000 savings that would be reimbursed by the state through the shared services. That would take that $1.5 million local share of the project almost down to $1 million, which the college would be able to cover out of its operating budget. So I'll take any questions on this one if you want, or I can finish up the next couple and come back.
This is a question with Brian, if I may. So is SUNY giving the 50% rental lease reimbursement with no limit? They've talked about limiting that.
What's that?
There had been talk that SUNY would limit the reimbursement.
The limit is based on a state allocation.
Right.
Related to the way that rental works for community college in the state of New York is the executive budget comes up with a flat allocation, and then the obligations across the 30 community colleges that go towards that allocation then go up to a 50% match. Currently, and in recent years, that allocation has been closer to 43% on total rental, but it does vary. The allocation itself on the executive budget has not increased in a number of years, which is why it's gotten what we traditionally refer to as a 50% match, down closer to about 43%.
So it's unlikely that this will get 50% match.
It'll likely be closer to 43, 44%.
I don't know if that makes any difference in the numbers, but it would be good to, whatever the true accurate idea would be good to include in here.
Justin, the debt obligation that you mentioned, are we saying that the county and the college are one and the same just for the purposes of this? Because that obligation would be assumed by the college, not by the county, and so.
Yeah, I want to be careful how we talk about this because we're working really hard to make this project qualify. The county is the college's fiscal sponsor, so the county's under our umbrella. For shared services purposes, the savings that we're projecting is that 50% of the capital costs, whether they be through the building the new facility or leasing from the county, would be a savings through us. Operationally, that wouldn't necessarily increase the ask from the community college to the county. Operationally, they've got that in their operating budget to go forward.
Okay.
So it goes back to what I was saying at the outset, which is that the college isn't eligible for shared services on its own, but under our umbrella, we think it can be. We met with the special project coordinator, our director from the governor's office, about the project, who's overseeing this whole program, and he was optimistic that we could frame this in a way that could fit, but it wasn't a firm commitment. This is certainly in line with what the governor is hoping to see. Multi-million-dollar savings of capital expenditures by sharing existing facilities and coordinating programming.
The only thing I want to say on this is you're right, this part did happen pretty fast. And I've heard from a lot of people that go to that stadium that aren't happy about this because it is the most beautiful natural grass stadium in that league, basically. And I think they've actually been voted that before, the best. So, I mean, taxpayers ought to have a little something to say about this too. And there's a lot of them that aren't happy about it, so.
I'm all in favor of the city and the county and the school getting together. It was many years ago that Arby Hatfield sat where Pat is, and the city and the county got together and upgraded that whole stadium down there. I know that one of the point persons is Sue Savage, and her father sat in these chairs. Is she going to help manage the shared service?
Yeah,
down there?
Sue set up the meeting with us, with the representative of the executive office, to try to figure out how we could make this project work. So we've been doing the outreach at the state level to frame this in a way that allows them to approve it, and I think we're on the right track in doing that. If there's no other questions on this one, I'll go on to the next couple. And Mr. Dennison, I do want to emphasize that this, being in this plan, doesn't commit us to any funding at this point or to any project. I want to emphasize that anything that requires your approval will be brought back to you, but anything that's not in the plan is not eligible for savings. So anything that we're talking about or discussing or trying to do, it makes better sense to throw it in so that if we do pursue it, it's eligible for savings in the future. And that's a great lead-in into the public safety. Yes, Mr. Didio?
Who decides on the, if we're going to use turf or natural grass?
I believe that the proposal, as is currently being developed between the city and the college, is to use turf, and the reason being that it would take the facility from being a roughly 3-month-a-year facility to being a 9 or 10-month-a-year facility. It would allow for spring semester baseball prior to the minor league season. It would allow for soccer and lacrosse seasons extended into both the spring and the fall. I don't know if I have all of the specific athletic seasons correct, but I believe I hit the sports, softball, baseball.
Yeah, I intend to provide an overview of the project.
Perfect. So you'll have another crack at this one. The next project that we included in the proposal is the shared public safety facility. And this is another project that's in a preliminary phase. The Public Works Committee voted in the spring to authorize me to enter into due diligence. And I really believe that's the phase that we're still in here. We haven't received hard numbers from the city yet in terms of what we'd be looking at for lease space. But to the extent that we can try to leverage additional state resources by including this in the plan as we continue to conduct due diligence is the purpose for submitting it. The proposal is, as many of you are aware, for the city to build a new fire station out at the Save-A-Lot Plaza on Seminary. There had been reserved space in the concept drawings for emergency management and the Emergency Operations Command, and we've discussed also including the 911 center in that as well, which would free up much of the basement almost, and simultaneously and separate from shared services, we're looking at consolidating the Office of the Aging in the Boyle Center, which would give us a full empty floor in the county office building. Not related to shared services, but as you know, the value of that as we go forward and look at our other capital needs might become very useful. So we don't have a specific savings number on this. This is more about operational advantages and trying to leverage additional state grants in the pursuit of implementing this project. And lastly is the City of Auburn and Cayuga County shared court space at the historic post office. As at least some of you know, the city and the Office of Court Administration has been expressing interest in expanding and adding a second city courtroom into the historic post office building in the area where we currently have WIC. We have been looking at alternative locations for WIC so that we could put together a feasibility of that relocation, and B, a cost estimate that we would need to negotiate in order to make sense of whether that could be done or not. Our cost estimate projections here are a couple $100,000, and we calculate that based on the saved cost for the city if they left and had to build a new court, as well as the lost revenue to the county if they did that, which would leave us with a vacant building, which would create other opportunities for us, but also other long-term revenue hole. So based on the capital cost of building a new court at $3 million, we arrived at that number based on the courthouse of similar size that was recently built in Watertown, assuming 30 years at 3%, and then the lost revenue to the county, and then netting off of that the rent that we would have to pay to add if we moved WIC to another location. So again, this is very preliminary. This would require a number of contract proposals and lease agreements that we would need to bring back to you for approval through the typical approval process. But including it to the extent that our due diligence is successful and we create opportunities would then allow for some reimbursement at the state level if we're able to do it within the prescribed 12-month period.
Justin, am I understanding, with the historical post office, would there be upfront expenditures on renovating and converting, and would that $200,000 be recognized in the first year?
The $200,000 would be our one-year savings. We have not factored into this build-out numbers because I believe that would be funded by the Office of Court Administration, so it wouldn't impact our savings or costs. What the other costs that we would have that aren't factored into here, but are something that we're aware of and that we would be part of the negotiation, is that we recently renovated that entire space over there for WIC, and I don't think the state would pay to move WIC to another space. So that relocation cost would have to be part of the negotiation with the city or the Office of Court Administration, so that we would have a suitable and comparable space in another location at no cost to us.
In regards to public safety, our lakes have been inundated with issues. Aqua has some piping that's near our county, and I'd like to see us shared services that make sure that we have not duplicate or not a backup, but triple. We need to have Aqua's water besides Cayuga Lake, Owasco Lake. And I'd like to see us work with Onondaga County maybe to bring a pipe from Weedsport maybe to Montezuma. Could that not be public safety issues?
Well, there's a number of affects a number of areas. Affects economic development, public works and infrastructure, public health and safety. So to the extent that I know there is the countywide water study that's going on, and I don't know yet if that's been looked at in there, but I can certainly check with Water and Sewer Authority and pass that recommendation along to see if it's whether they've made a feasibility assessment of that connection.
There's grants available.
I can speak to that a little bit, just to ease Mr. Lattimore so he can sleep tonight. The Water and Sewer Authority is indeed looking at options right now, and they've had some proposals presented to them at their last meeting.
There are some grant timelines that I don't know whether soil and water or sewer and water are going to hit those, but there's money available, and we should be on it.
We're looking at options, trying to find the best one.
Thank you, Mr. Whitman.
So the next step on this process is 3 public hearings next week, as I outlined earlier. And then we'll have a final panel meeting on August 17th at the BOCES. Following that, the plan has to be submitted to the state by September 15th, and a final public presentation has to be presented publicly. And I don't know if that's at the legislature meeting or if that's just another public hearing. We'll have to confirm that. I don't think the guidance was clear. But there'll be another public presentation of the plan in the fall that seeks to update and incorporate the recommendations of the legislature, of the public, through the public hearings and that process.
Why, just out of curiosity, the public hearings are at 4 o'clock? I mean, people aren't home from work yet. Why are we having a public hearing in south, center, and northern part of the county for people that maybe all right up there because we're all farmers, but I mean.
I think they farm in the. I think they farm in the south too.
Well, maybe the south too, exactly. But what I'm just saying, there's a lot of people that are going to look at that and go, "Oh, 4 o'clock."
Yeah, I think when you select these opportunities, it's always going to be inconvenient for somebody. We could do them in the evening, and people would say, why don't you do them in the daytime? You could do them on the weekend, and people would say, why don't you do them during the week? I think what we're trying to do is
why don't we do these at 4 o'clock? Because some of the people sitting here are at work.
Yeah.
I mean, at 4 o'clock just seems really stupid, to be perfectly honest with you. It's their money. It's the taxpayers' money that we're spending. 6 o'clock, like we do meetings here. 4 o'clock, because I know what I'm going to hear when people see this. Oh, you're going to have the meeting so that nobody will show up. That's what they're going to say.
They are saying.
well, we could look at. We don't have to only hold 3, and we could certainly look at adding another one at a later time. If that's it's a reasonable suggestion, it's a reasonable request, and we could certainly look at adding a 4th one in an evening.
Got one other question too.
Yes,
There's
sir.
technically 62 counties, whether you call them counties or boroughs. How come they don't have to participate?
The boroughs are basically one municipality, so they weren't subject to this. So, but yes, you're correct. There are 62.
I thought maybe it's because that's where most of our tax money goes, but.
They actually pay up.
Any other questions about the plan? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to present this on your behalf.
And thank you for all your work on that. Do we have anybody for public to be heard?
Minutes for approval, June 12th and 25th, 2018.
Move on. Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried. CCC report, Dr. Durant.
Good evening, everyone. Certainly, the presentation of the shared services plan starts to take a little momentum away from the presentation tonight related to the Falcon Park project, but we will be slightly repetitive, perhaps lay a picture that's a little bit different than what you may fully be aware of. But before I do that, we're in the last 6 weeks or so of our fiscal year that I've been talking about all year. Enrollment-wise, we are experiencing growth in the summer beyond what we expected, which is a positive thing. We budgeted this year, 17-18, for 2,500 FTE, as I've said, I think every month, and we're on pace to reach over 2,625 FTE this year. It's the first year of growth since, I believe, 2011-12, which is a positive thing for the institution. As we're looking ahead for fall, bringing in our next class, our applications have been tracking up all year, and they continue to be, as of today, nearly 3% for applications for admission. So, we're always grateful that we have, more students this year than a year ago that are considering Cayuga Community College as their choice for higher education. And we're also hopeful that even more students this year will select us for that choice and be enrolling in the fall. So our continued focus is on efforts for recruitment, orientation, and registration as we look ahead for next year. I also want to just take a moment and recognize that one of our college trustees is with me tonight, Trustee Klink. Thank you for being here. In the recent weeks, you've been able to hopefully read, learn, hear about the Falcon Park exploration. What, may not be clear to some, and I'll own part of it, is that this is not something that is going quickly. The exploration of athletic fields, the talk about athletic fields for Cayuga Community College, as I understand it, goes back decades without a solution and without it getting done. When I came here, one of the challenges presented to me by some of you, by some of the other members of the community, is to figure out a way to be able to have athletic fields, to give the students the facilities in which they deserve, and to help increase the presence, the notoriety of the institution, to want to attract potential student athletes from a distance to Cayuga Community College. Helps enrollment, helps the community, helps with our reputation, and helps continue to put us on a map in a different way than perhaps we've been. We've done due diligence throughout the college property, the nature trail, working with a local school district. Superintendent Perazzolo has been tremendous. We've done due diligence looking at county properties, at city properties, and at the end of the day, the best facility that would be state-of-the-art at the institution that would also fit into our campus modernization plan is nearly $15 million. And candidly, I thought it would be irresponsible to move that project forward, even though it would start to spread out our campus, it would start to change, I think, the entire field for the campus. It does not sound